You know, the panel was introduced as NGOs. I actually would like to introduce them as the doers. So as much as we talk, and as much as we dream, and as much as we, I don't know, pontificate, then you have people who basically will just say, you know what, we're gonna make it happen. And I'm really honored, truly, to be able to sit down with the doers. There's obviously a lot more in the audience, but this is really 3 visionaries who, in the last 10, 15 years, and each will tell their story, but in the last 10, 15 years, basically said we're gonna do something. And instead of looking at all the obstacles, which as you guys know were massive, they did something. They did it outside, they did it, you know, I keep learning about جوات السور وبرات السور. So sometimes they were برات السور, sometimes they were جوات السور, it didn't matter, they got things done. So how we're gonna do this is first, if we can just take a minute, maybe each one that's introducing themselves and the organization, that would be great, and then I have other questions. That would be great. Rania, we'll start with you.
Sure. Rania Sikkar. I co-founded Jusur many years ago. I work in the tech industry here as well. Family is from Damascus. I was born here. We used to spend summers in Damascus growing up, and that's me.
Hi everybody, Lina Sergi Attar. I'm an architect. I graduated from University of Aleppo, and then I went to Rhode Island School of Design and then MIT. I don't practice architecture. I run Karam Foundation full-time. Karam is an organization that is supporting Syrian communities since 2011. It was established in 2007. I'm originally from Aleppo.
جورج بطاح from Damascus, من الميدان, برات السور. I came to the US in 2013 as part of the Jusur IIT scholarship. I graduated from IIT, and I was one of the co-founder of Syrian Youth Empowerment that is aimed of supporting Syrian students through the counseling process to get them full scholarships at top universities around the world, and particularly in America.
So what I'd like to do is I'd like to have you please walk us through 2 parts. There's obviously kind of before liberation and after liberation. So it would be great to maybe take a few minutes to talk about how you were operating and what were your objectives and your mission pre-December 8th, and then we'll talk in the second part about post-December 8th, if that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we founded Jusur and why we founded Jusur, because I think that's relevant to many in this room as you think about the type of work you want to do now to help Syria. So we founded Jusur back in 2011 because many of us, we'd all been born outside of the country, recognized there was a major opportunity gap inside Syria that touched us each personally. So in my case, like many of you, we used to spend summers in Damascus. And as kids, you'd hang out with your cousins, and all the experiences you had in the US were similar to the experiences they had as kids in Syria. We were so similar. By the time we were 16 or 17, our worlds couldn't have been more different. If we were in the US, we had these crazy big dreams about what we wanted to do in our lives. And if you were Syrian as a girl, your ambition was to get married, very young. And if you were a boy, what I experienced is my cousins, the older ones went to college, and then the younger ones thought there was no purpose in going to college, so they'd split their father's business in 4, and that's the way they lived. And so that stuck with me, and it stuck with the other Jusur founders, which is we had this huge opportunity gap, and how could we close it? And we'd all gone off to college and started studying economics and recognized the assets that Syria had were limited. It was really hard to imagine how we'd overcome the opportunity gap that existed. And you know, some of us went off and were working in consulting and all these different things, and we realized we had this crazy asset, which is represented in this room. We had these expatriates living around the world who could possibly be that asset Syria needed to help close that opportunity gap. So we studied what other expatriate countries had done. We studied Israel, which is an amazing example of how they used their community around the world with birthright programs and getting their people in different companies to invest R&D centers in Israel. We studied India, as some of you talked about, and looked at diaspora bonds. And we said, we looked at Lebanon, which has done an amazing job with their expatriate community, and we said, how do we do something like this? So in 2011, we hosted some of us hosted a conference for Harvard in Damascus. We had 300 members from around the Middle East and the world to come to Damascus, and we had 11 Harvard faculty. And many of the founders of Jusur met there. This was before the conflict. It was March 17th. The first protest happened that week. And we exchanged views on what we hoped for in the country and what we would do, and the concept of JSOUR came together. And so we founded the organization, and it was meant to create a very strong expatriate community for Syrians around the world, from Latin America to Europe to North America, all different backgrounds, coming together to do things like diaspora bonds, to do things like getting their companies to invest in R&D centers in Syria. And so that's what we founded. We got it started. But we changed over time, given the conflict and the shape that it took. We had to narrow the mission. And so we said the most important thing we can do right now is focus on preventing a lost generation for Syria. We needed to focus on education, given the challenges the country faced. And so we ended up focusing on 3 pillars, all in service of preventing a lost generation. The first was higher education. We wanted to make sure that we had the skills necessary to rebuild the country when the time was right, and to get young people to work on Syria from outside Syria in the interim. And we focused on multipliers, and I can't imagine a better example of a multiplier than George, but individuals who had capacity to be massive change agents. And so we've done about 940 high school and university scholarships in over 100 universities, 22 countries, in all sorts of disciplines: environmental science, film, AI, all focused on these multipliers who can then be in rooms like this, who can do amazing things for the country. So that was one. Second was primary education. We were very focused on ensuring that Syrian children learned to read and write. And so we ran schools in Lebanon. We worked across 8 different schools and have educated 16,000 children. We ran a major teacher training program where we took refugees and we taught them how to handle children with these needs, psychosocial needs, kids who'd been out of school for multiple years, educating the entire family, because the families needed to help reinforce and keep their kids in school. And we expanded from early childhood education all the way to brevet baccalaureate as we learned about the different needs of children. And hopefully that experience will be very helpful now in getting kids back into school in Syria, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And the third main program was along the lines of what you're all doing here, which was focused on the entrepreneurship in the SMB sector. We realized that there were no formal jobs, and we needed to create jobs in other ways. So we've run, with many partners in this room, major boot camps focused on giving people the skills they need. We've worked with over 700 SMBs and startups through Syria and the surrounding areas. So that's what we've been up to. I just want to talk about 3 things that were really important in this journey that allowed us to do all of this work. The first was the diversity of the team. The founders all came together. None of us knew each other, and we were so different. We had lawyers, we had people who'd worked in public policy, we had brand and media people, and that led to amazing diversity of thought. And lots of crazy debates, very intense debates, and people I didn't really want to work with. I'm like, who is this guy who's blocking my big idea, and why is he saying we can't do this? And that translated into some of the best decision-making that allowed us to get to this point. So I'll give you a couple of examples. When it came to naming the organization, I, of course, wanted to call it the Syrian Expatriate Network, which would have been a disaster. We came to JSOUR because it was a smarter way to think about branding. We debated whether we should take a stance with the government or against the government, and we debated that for at least 8 hours. We ended up staying neutral throughout the thing. But had we not had so many different perspectives, we wouldn't have been as careful in that decision making. So the first piece of advice that helped JSOUR get to this place was the diversity and strength of very different team. The second was learning by doing. It's so hard in these contexts to understand what your programs should be because none of us understand the situation on the ground. And there was a bias to sit in a room and just debate and try to get to a perfect program. And what we learned is when you actually just go to Lebanon when we started and come up with an idea and try to run a school and run, literally 17 experiments till you figure out something that works. That's how we got to the programs. And so now as we sit in Syria, we think we need to do the same thing. Instead of coming up with the perfect program from outside, you just got to go roll up your sleeves and, like we do in different contexts that we work in every day, is just experiment. So that was the second thing. And the third was really focusing on institutional strength. How do you First, when you start, it's all of you as volunteers. It's your weekend activities, you're spending all your time doing it, but over time you need something that lasts far beyond the founders. And so how do you think about when you start hiring employees? How do you think about a board that constantly brings in new blood and new energy so you have the transition from one board to the next? So those are some of the things we did and applied over time that we've learned that I can share. I talked faster than I normally do.
Thank you, Rania. I started Karam in 2007, and when I started, I come to this basically by saying, like, we never thought of ourselves as an NGO, and I definitely think that that is not where we want to be. You know, right now, like, we have a team, most of our team are Syrian refugees. Most of our work is happening in Turkey at this point, but we worked all across Syria. We worked in other countries as well, but we became more and more focused on southern Turkey and Istanbul. But a lot of times when we hire somebody new, they'll be like, well, what, like, they want to get the pamphlet, like the book of, like, how do I do things, and with the idea that we're going to become Save the Children later. And I'm like, no, like, that's like very insulting. I don't want to become Save the Children. I don't want to become a large agency. There is no book. When you join Karam, you have to build it with us. All of you build the organization together, and you're responsible for that. So there's a big shift in how we actually think about the organization, and that's kind of like how we continue to build the thing as it goes. So from 2007 to 2011, you know, it lived on my kitchen table. I come from an architecture background, not a business background, and so my business plan from 2007 to 2011 is the bank account should be always as close to zero as possible, because my idea was, you have an event, you pay for the event, you fundraise, you give the money, and we're done. That's not how you can actually build a thriving organization. So we've been learning as we go. In 2011, because of what we'd built in the community in Chicago of trust and helping refugees from Iraq and helping local organizations and international organizations, people started coming and saying, well, how do we help now? We have a crisis right now, right at the beginning of the revolution. And so we jumped in and we started building the networks, and we did what we've always done until this point, which is actually very important to post December 8, is you go into a community and you ask them what they need. You have to start by asking people what they need. We can't come with an assumption knowing what we actually have to do, and we bring our knowledge that we have. And so we started with helping emergency field offices in Homs, in Dara, in Halab. We were doing a lot of different kinds of projects. I was able to go for the first time to southern Turkey and inside Syria into an internally displaced camp at the end of 2012, because I wanted to see what this thing was like in person. And I went to Altme camp and Bab Salame camp, and I was actually really shocked, because you see these camps, and then when you're there, the children all run up to you. They have nothing. They were in tents. A lot of these people are still in containers now. A camp still exists, 25,000 people in each camp. And when I saw that, I realized the difference between agencies and NGOs and what we were coming in as Syrians. Because if an NGO, UNICEF, UNHCR, Save the Children, when they want to go and build a camp, they have to know that it has to exist for the 17 years, now it's like 24 years average, before they even go and invest in building a camp. And for me as a Syrian, I was looking at this camp and thinking, I want this to not exist tomorrow. Like, I don't want this to, how do we get rid of the camp? And that was the difference between the outlook of the separation between the political crisis that was happening in Syria and the humanitarian crisis. The world kind of separated them in. Like, we had a refugee crisis, and when we would go talk about like a lot of advocacy to say, if we don't end the war, you're going to continue having these refugees. And of course, nobody was listening to that, because there was this divorce of, let's help the refugees and let's not try to stop people from becoming refugees. And that's a really important point. And so we started working in the camps. We ended up establishing ourselves in Reyhanli, which is this town right on the Syrian border, right outside the border in southern Turkey. And we built something called Karam House. And Karam House, we do 3 basic programs that we established by going into the community and asking, what do you need? The first one was, we wanted to keep kids in school, because we were seeing that there was a lot of child labor. So we have Karam Families, which supports Syrian refugee families on condition that they send their kids to school. We did this by meeting kids that were working instead of going to school and going and visiting them in their homes. So one of our first families we supported in 2016 or 2015, Muhammad was working at a gas station, and he was 14 years old. Today, Muhammad is a computer engineer. Yes. And we have so many. so many people from the Families program, and we have about 300 families in our program supporting all of the kids, getting them through school, getting them to university. The second program is Karam Studios, and that's our innovative education program. And that one, when we started it, we wanted to actually really go in, kind of what Rania was talking about, that potential. I studied in Aleppo, and I knew that there was a limited potential for every single person in Syria, and I want to make sure that all of these kids, these refugee kids, had the exact opportunities and maybe even more opportunities that my own children have in Lake Forest, Illinois. And so when we would go and we tell people we're going to put together a makerspace and give every kid a laptop, and we're going to teach this innovative education program, which is design-based learning, developed by my friend Saeed Arida at MIT, who runs a private school in Cambridge, Massachusetts, because his idea is to revolutionize American education. We took that model, made it in Arabic, made it for free for the first time for all of these kids to get, and they learn how to design and solve problems, very similar to the Silicon Valley mindset. And we do that for kids between 14 to 18, and we've done thousands and thousands of studios with these kids. And the last program is Karam Scholars, where we put kids in universities and get them we give them scholarships to attend universities, and they also study all across different kinds of fields. And so this is what we've been focused on. Our goal is to build 10,000 leaders, and the idea behind 10,000 leaders is because we grew up in a country that had one leader, one family, one picture, and I wanted to create 10,000 opportunities, 10,000 bada'il to be able to take the country forward. Our idea was you can do this wherever you are in the world, but now we'll be able to do it inside Syria.
SYE started in 2015. We came to the United States as part of the Jusur program to IIT in 2013. And what was very visible that we were all itching to help Syria. So we were like running marathons, fundraising here and there, while figuring out internships. And in 2015, it happened over a hookah session in our place in Chicago, where with the 3 other Syrians, Majid Abd Samad, Abdurrahman Arnaout, and Tawfiq Simo, we just came up with this idea. What we realized when we graduated in 2015, that actually Syrian students are very brilliant, and American universities are not as difficult as we think about it when we are in Syria, but there are a tremendous amount of challenges to make it there. So what we wanted to do is experiment with a new model, which is let's flip the narrative a little bit. Instead of fundraising for scholarships, let's see if the universities will offer full scholarships. So we started learning, and we realized that all the top universities do have full scholarships, but they do have academic standards that they cannot compromise on, and they had appetite to help and support. So the idea that we came up with is, why don't we find talented Syrian students and put a curriculum and put a model to get them up to speed with the way that the American system works and the way so they can communicate with the universities. And we put that program. We forcibly recruited some of the other Jusur scholars at IIT to be mentors. And we built this curriculum. We paid for SAT, we paid for TOEFL. We were helping in English. We were helping them with thinking about their essays, thinking what universities they should be applying to. And we started with 19 students. We were literally promising people samak bil bahr. We were just a bunch of fresh graduates in America telling people like, we'll get you to Harvard if you just work with us. So we worked with 19 students the first year, and the KPI we set for ourselves is like, if we can get 1 student on a full scholarship, we'll call this a success. And from the first year, we had 9 students out of the 19 getting full scholarships. Thank you. Thank you. At Harvard, at MIT, at Stanford, at a bunch of other universities. I remember my mentee actually got like 8 admissions, and he was like debating between Harvard and Stanford, and he ended up going to Harvard. But I remember the Stanford admission officers like reach out to me, trying kind of to lobby, like, can we convince him to come to Stanford? And this is where we knew that we have something there, and this is where we started kind of thinking more seriously about about it. And we have been growing the organization since then. It's much more institutional right now. We have like expert counselors who are helping the students. We work with 150 students every year. Students 18 years old, like around 18 years old, depending if they're taking a gap year or not. And then we expanded into graduate program and into a prep program for the students who need a little bit more of a push to be able to be ready to apply English, just preparation overall. And we have generated so far, every year we have tens and tens of students who get scholarships from literally all universities that offer full scholarships. We've built these relationships. We've been showcasing what our students can do. It became much easier with time because when the students started trickling into universities, like the campuses would fall in love with them, and they started paying attention and wanted more Syrians. And we've generated so far in the last 9 years around $80 million worth of scholarship for Syrians at every single top university you can think of. Thank you. Thank you very much. The one thing that I want to highlight that, two things actually. First, we were very much inspired by other Syrians. Rania is at that time and until now and forever will be a great inspiration for me personally and for many, many other people. But we've seen that, one, you can still have a career and you still contribute to Syria. It's like just like breaking that cycle of like, oh, I can only do one thing. But also the idea is that we always have to have hope. Our conversation with Rania when we first came, it was like 2013, 2014, we were very depressed. Like we felt that the country is slipping and we would feel like, there's no hope, and Rania would always just cut us off. Like, no, there's so much hope, so much talent. The other thing that I want to highlight is the sense of community that built, both for us, the 33 Syrian students at IIT. We became best friends. We're still best friends, and we'll continue to be best friends. Very beautiful sense of community. It felt like home for us. That made the whole exile experience much more tolerable and a journey that is very beautiful. And we are seeing it now with our students. Our students now, very organically, we are designing the programs to get people to know each other, to work with each other, people from Idlib, with Hama, with people who are in Germany, with people who are in Turkey. People started meeting each other and started to bond. And we have the pod system where people get together. And now with hundreds of students in the United States, very much self-organized. They meet every year. They self-organize for a new year in Boston usually because we have MIT and Harvard and Brown and a lot of people convene in one of the frat houses. This year, 40 people self-organized and met for a new year, and it became really a sense of community. People are helping each other with internships. People are helping each other psychologically. People are helping each other in any way they can, and they feel the belonging to Syria in a way that we needed so much, and we needed that to use as a catalyst for what is the future will hold for us, and that gave me so much hope. And it was one of these consequences. We weren't thinking about that, but seeing it now, I think it's maybe even more important than the scholarship and the knowledge and the intellect and everything that is happening from the original vision. And I mean, this event is just case in point of how important the community is and how strong the Syrian community is and how much really, really close.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have to say, in my lifetime, first time I hear a positive ROI around hookah. So I guess there is hope.
Bring hookah back.
Yes. So we have, I do want to squeeze in one question. So, and it's to each one of you. And I think it's really important for you to answer it. We are limited on time because I'd like to get people to also ask some questions. So the question I have is, as an organization, you have two aspects. You have what happened December 8th, you have what happened in January with the new administration. And every time we wake up, there is new cuts and more cuts and more cuts. I cannot imagine, unless you tell me otherwise, I cannot imagine that's not impacting you. So between what happened December 8th and the liberation of Syria, and also looking at funding, and again, you can tell us more, but looking at funding, how are you looking at your organization, how it's going to change? And it would be great if we can limit the answer to 2 minutes each. Thank you.
Actually, what's happening with the US administration doesn't affect us at all. We've never taken any money from the US government, and I don't think any governments, just because Syrians are so skeptical of external funding, though we would like to moving forward. We'll debate which governments, but we want to do things at bigger scale. This is a huge moment for Syria, as you've all said, and it's a big turning point for the work we do, and it's very exciting because the entire founding team of JSOUR is back, and we've crashed the board meetings, and every Monday at 8 a.m. we spend an hour together learning. We're very much in a learning phase. This is going to be the first opportunity we have to work in Syria. We didn't work in Syria in the last 14 years. And so this is the opportunity to do all the things we hoped to do when we founded the organization. So we're in this learning phase. We would like to play a very big role in several areas. One is building strong education institutions in the country. Two is continuing to work to strengthen entrepreneurs and the SMB sector. And third is continuing to bring the Syrian expatriate network together from around the world so that we have a registry of all people who want to help and play a role, whether it's in diaspora bonds or bringing their companies to invest in R&D or just to go teach at universities. So there's many areas we've identified as opportunities for us to start working, and we've been doing this through our weekly meetings and research. One is there's going to be a big need in education in rural areas. That's where it's most neglected, where schools need to be rebuilt, where there's not enough teachers. Vocational training is going to be very important for Syria, both because many students won't be able to go back to school given how many years they've missed, and we're going to need a lot of trades to rebuild the country. Capacity building, both for teachers and government. We've never had, we're going to need to build up an administrative capacity where these individuals in government can actually govern these massive challenges that the country faces. So how might we do capacity building? University and tertiary education. I love the comment from earlier today about how do we get expertise from around the world to be temporary, for example, teachers and educators in these universities. So those are all areas. In terms of immediate needs, first of all, we've posted our first role in Syria as a country director. And we're realizing it is challenging to find the right talent there. And many people who we'd like of our own students to go back are still hesitant because the conditions aren't there yet. So I'd love to talk about that at the right time. So we're looking to get our first leader on the ground. Second of all, we're authoring a white paper on the education roadmap for Syria so it can be a public good for all organizations and institutions working in education so that everyone can leverage that research, including a lot of data work that's required to understand the nature of the needs. And then we're also starting to get programs working. So we're starting to get people who are saying, I have a project, I want to build a school. Can you partner with us both on the funding as well as the technical capacity? And we have lots of ideas there about how we get different communities around the world to each adopt a school, do the funding for that school, and then think about how they can transfer expertise. So those are some of the areas, but we're very much in learning and planning phase and hope within the next several months to kick off the first programs and get into the learning by doing phase. The last thing I'll say is we want to work at much greater scale moving forward, and that's a big area we're thinking about. 10 schools, great. 16,000 students, great. We have an entire education infrastructure we need to improve, and so we're really brainstorming and thinking about how might we do this at a totally different scale going forward. And I have one more point I just want to make. What I'm hearing a lot, and even from the JSOUR team, is let's wait. The conditions aren't there yet. They're not quite there yet. Let's wait 6 months. And I think we all have a role to play to change the conditions on the ground. People are not coming back because financially they can't come back. Security, electricity, education. If each one of us goes in and addresses one of the conditions on the ground, even if it feels not yet ready, we change the calculation for so many different things, and we start to create these, hopefully, eventually tipping points.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rania. For us, we have been doing a lot of work on figuring out how we can work in Syria. We're registering Karam as an organization inside Syria. I'm very excited that next week we're going to be launching our Mawa'id Ramadan project that we haven't been able to do for years in Aleppo. It's a project that will feed 78,000 people. Yeah. And we actually have Ramadan activities inside Aleppo, in camps in northern Syria, and still in Turkey. I want to emphasize the point that refugees, we've been doing surveys since December 8, very close surveys with our entire community in Turkey, all of our families, all of the students, all of the scholars, and the reality is, while a lot of people want to go back, they can't go back. They don't have homes to go back to. So for the time being, Karam has to actually continue to support the Syrian communities that we have in in Turkey. We're not calling them refugees anymore. We're calling them displaced people, and hopefully they won't be displaced for much longer, but we can't leave people behind. We have to continue to support them while we're building out the capacity to work inside Syria. We're also focusing on education. Education can't wait. We are working on rural Damascus and rural Aleppo to start reconstructing schools and bringing the Karam House program to these schools, because also it's a method of scaling, it's a method of keeping the kids in school, keeping the boys at school, keeping the girls out of child marriages, all around, but finally we'll be able to do something where we weren't able to do in Turkey and actually really go into the school system and be able to interact there. For a lot of people years ago, when I told people that the most important thing that for a refugee kid is the maker space, is the laptop, is the 3D printer and the laser cutter, people would be like, oh my God, what are you talking about? We need to feed them, we need to teach them how to read. It's not true. What we've seen with this 14 to 18-year-old kids is that they are learning those soft skills that a lot of you are talking about so that you can hire people in sync jobs. They're learning them as teenagers, and we saw that we were having success stories in Turkey, which is a very hard market for Syrian refugees. They were being hired, which I predicted, I didn't think it was going to happen so fast, but people are hiring our graduates without actually an accreditation or anything really, but because based on the skills that they have, collaboration, teamwork, being able to talk about their projects verbally, design-wise, written Arabic and English. And we've even have a case of one refugee student we had that left Turkey and went to Sweden. He went when he was in 12th grade, wasn't able to take his papers with him, wanted to go to university. They said, we can't take you in without your papers from Turkey. Went and met the admissions officer in Sweden, showed him his online portfolio that every Karam House kid has, and based on the portfolio got accepted into university. So these things work. So I wanted to make a pitch to everybody here wanting to hire people. We have people you can hire eventually, and we want to see how we can take what you know and bring it into the teenage program so they're ready for those jobs. But I want to say one last thing. I want to make a bit, my big ask for this room is, please, if you could donate, because we don't take government grants. Our funding comes from individuals, from a lot of Syrians, the Syrian American community, family foundations. And yes, while we are not affected directly by these USAID cuts, we are going to be affected because so many of these large agencies are going to go to the foundations that support people like Karam, and they're going to have to make difficult choices. But for this room, our choice is Syria first. And so I please hope that you will all write your names down, donate to Karam, donate to one of our organizations, become a monthly donor. Please talk to me if you need more information, because the next few years are going to be really difficult for fundraising, specifically for Syria.
Thank you. George?
2 minutes. Let's do this. We're very excited. We're very, very excited. And what we're thinking at a high level is how can we move the weight of SYE from here to Syria? We do want to continue to bring talent to be able to create and foster communities like this and talents that can go back and support. But what we are thinking in systems, how can we create systems that create more opportunities for growth? So one of the things, like, how can we create an opportunity for all Syrian Americans to go teach English, for example, in the summer, or for anyone who's interested? Can we create a system? Can we create some sort of meaning for the people who are interested in contributing, making it easier? We're thinking of how can we leverage our relationship with the universities to start working with Syrian universities. Can we have a Harvard Center in Syria in a few years? That's a very worthy cause, not only on the education front, but from also civil society front, from liberties front. When you start have the weight of international organization working and operating, and Syrians are exposed to. So we're thinking, how can we do that? How can we foster that kind of mentality in Syria? We're very interested in supporting, like, something we've been talking about, English, professional skills. We do think, as many people said, like, Syrians really are gold. They're gem. They just need a little bit, like, like a little bit of polishing, and they're actually some of the best professionals that that I've worked with in my career. And I think just giving that little push, how can we do it at a system level? And I wanna, what Lina said about her students, I actually hired Muhammad Ramadan on my team. He's one of the best performers, and I can vouch for that. And truly, hiring Syrians, obviously this is what we are all trying to do here. It's not only a good thing for Syria, it's a good thing for your companies, truly. You're getting really, really great value proposition, and I think that working toward that is a very worthy cause, and we're thinking a lot about it.
Thank you, George. I did have one more question, but I think I'm going to turn it to the audience, see if they have any questions. I believe we have 5 minutes, so we can maybe take 2-3 questions. There's 2 microphones on both sides. Bassett?
يعطيكم العافية. 2 questions. First one is, after December 8th, like so with the liberation, now all Syrians think we have country back, so we need to rebuild it. How you can turn these emotions to actions. So number 2 is, we have like so many NGOs, which it's much needed because of the amount of distractions. But I see like some kind of like replicated projects. So how can we align more to have a better impact and support the cause? Thank you.
What I would love to do is maybe one could take that, yeah, and then so we can grab more questions. Feel free.
Sure. I think that, you know, this is an example of we do talk to each other and collaborate, but I agree with you. Like, for instance, Jasur and Karam have very similar approaches in that kind of entrepreneurial approach to the work with education, but they were very focused on Lebanon. We were focused on Turkey. Now we're going to be in Syria. I would see a huge opportunity. I also spoke yesterday with Khalid from Mulham about how we can collaborate. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that, and I agree with you, to be able to collaborate more to get things done, because it's going to be the same problems, we're seeing them across the country.
Great, thank you. Other questions?
I actually have a question, since I have the mic. For all 3 of you, in less than 10 seconds each, what's one thing we can do over the next 3 months that we can help other than donating?
Donate.
Yeah. Donate and then sign up to volunteer. You can mentor. Anas Osman came with his entire family and young children and mentored in Rehaniye. Come please mentor in the summer, bring your families. There's a lot to do.
As we start rolling out some of these programs, we'll be engaging the community. For example, as I mentioned, the Adopt a School program. We've got a group in New York that wants to take on the first project. So we'll be looking to communities for things like that.
Aside from hiring, I would say there's so much energy now. Find 2-3 Syrians that you can talk to, that you can help, that you can support in a meaningful way, whether career advice, whether general support. I think that built the trust, and that like has like the multiplier effect. The influence that each one this room has can be great on the ground and with the people, and with inspiration and hope that gives.
Thanks. Hamad?
Are there any programs where our children or the children of the people who are in this room can participate?
Yes, there is. We're starting a summer program this summer, inspired by Anas's experience, and I'm going to volunteer Anas that he'll take all of your children to Turkey to volunteer this summer.
We've had a summer program in Lebanon for many years that Amr and Leila's kids participated in, and I see Juan here too, his daughter has participated in that. We haven't been running it as actively because Lebanon has been less safe in the last few years, but hopefully we'll be able to get it back. But as we thought about things like that other countries had done, getting youth engaged early is incredibly valuable, and it changes their whole outlook on life in terms of the impact they want to have.
Can I just say one, because I think it would be interesting. We're starting English circles where people remotely can help other Syrians get better English and talk to them. So we will launch this soon. We'd love to have as many volunteers.
That's amazing. One more question.
Yeah, today, Iyad Yaqub. So today is February 22nd, 2026. And you said 2025 was a wonderful year. Describe it in 2 words.
George, 2 words.
Pure magic.
Try that.
Pure magic. 2 words.
Great.
Massive impact.
I actually want to end on a thought that takes more than 2 words. I think there's a need to be very paranoid and move with urgency. And there's a lot of hope in this room, but we have massive problems and challenges facing Syria. And so many things can go wrong. And that requires us to do things we're all individuals working as nonprofits. Like, how much change can we have given these challenges? Therefore, we have to work in very smart ways. A couple of things. One is this concept of paranoia and urgency. It's very easy to wait and to say, you know, we're going to wait till the conditions are better. But how can we each overcome that? And secondly, how can we work as multipliers? You know, as you think about the work you're going to do to hire 25,000 people, how do you work on organizations like Samasource did or Andela did, which pooled demand and then created the supply in the country by solving the institutional barriers, like training at scale, and solving the infrastructure challenges that we're going to face. So think about the paranoia and the move with urgency, and also the multiplier importance, because we're just small individuals and the country faces incredibly big challenges. So that's what I think it's going to take to have a successful 26.
I just want, Rania's amazing at talking about the big picture and the big scale, but I want to also bring it back to like real people and something that connects us. Just 2 stories. The first story is Yusuf. Yusuf was a kid in Istanbul, dreamt of coming to Karam House. He was aged out of Karam House. He was 18 and he couldn't come. He worked at a clothes factory, and he told me that his job was folding clothes. And he said that I thought that I was going to fold clothes for my whole entire life. And he was able, after he applied to our scholarship, he was able to become a Karam scholar, and he said, my dream is to work at Karam House. And we hired him as our first Karam scholar graduate as a mentor at Karam House Istanbul. He worked for us for 2 years. In that, he applied to the Jusur scholarship, and now he's studying engineering as a master's student at Oxford University with the Jusur.
All right.
He's incredible. No, one more. Just because I want you all to know, when you donate to organizations like ours, we're Syrian-led, we're Syrian groups. Sometimes you think like, okay, what is this money going to? How far is it going to go? And even for us, sometimes we don't know how far the investment can go. So for years, Karam used to support underground schools in Aleppo. Before 2016, under the barrel bombs, and we would just fund these schools. I couldn't go to these schools, none of our teams could go, and we would just hope that this is doing some kind of good. And then on years and years, we did this, and then after the fall of Aleppo, we couldn't work in Aleppo anymore. 2023 or 2022, I was in New York City, and George was there. We were at a film screening, and he was with one of his star students, Abdullah, who went to Harvard. Graduate from Harvard, amazing SYE success story, super proud of George, super proud of all these kids, and Abdullah was there. I was excited to meet him, but when I was speaking and he saw the logo, he came up to me after and he said, I need to tell you something. When I saw that logo, I remembered that I was in one of those underground schools and that Karam supported, and that kid went to Harvard. So the impact is huge.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.